scares the hell out of the slopes. My boys love it. Hey, we're gonna play music!
My love affair with Wagner began when I was a child, and first heard his music on my father's gramophone. It was the overture to Tannhäuser, one of his earlier operas, and it did something most extraordinary to me. I've always loved music. I've always been hopeless at performing it. Couldn't really play an instrument, certainly can't sing, but it's made me do things inside. It's released forces within me, and no music has done it like Wagner's. Over the years, my relationship with Wagner's music has grown deeper and stronger, but also more complicated. Because it's no secret my passion was also shared by him. And some people believe it even inspired his terrible crimes. I'm Jewish, so those are hard facts to face. And there have been times when I've wondered if I ought really to love Wagner at all. I'm in Bayreuth, in Bavaria, southern Germany. They call this the Green Hill, and at the summit sits a legendary theatre. Well, for anyone who loves Wagner as I do, this place is Stratford-upon-Avon, Mecca, Graceland, all rolled into one. Bayreuth, the home of the Bayreuth Festival Theatre. The Bayreuth Festival is exclusively dedicated to the music of Richard Wagner, who wrote 13 operas during a turbulent career. I'm fulfilling a lifetime's ambition by coming to the festival house, just as Wagner fulfilled his by building it more than 130 years ago. It's still driven today by the ideals which inspired him. Yeah! And dedicated to the highest standards of performance and production. Even the boxes are Wagnerian. There's so much to look at, but only one place to start, and that's with the music. As always, the centerpiece of this year's festival is the Ring Cycle, 4 epic operas inspired by Germanic myth.
In 1874, the German composer Richard Wagner completed a monumental piece of work that had taken him over a quarter of a century to write, The Ring of the Nibelung. This gigantic saga, a music drama lasting over 15 hours from start to finish, is far and away the most ambitious undertaking by one person in the history of European music.
The whole cycle runs to around 18 hours, performed over 4 nights. I can't think of another composer who's written anything as ambitious as that before or since.
Wagner didn't just write the music, he wrote the text as well. The Ring Cycle gave expression to a whole political and cultural movement, German nationalism. It couldn't have been written at any other time or in any other country. The Ring totally redrew the map of 19th century music, and it cast its spell on other art forms as well.
Put on sidewalk up, sing it loud. Into the Romeo Foxtrot, shall we dance?
suppose this must be the most famous Wagner tune of them all. But I think it's a pity if you only experience his music in bite-sized chunks. Because he was more than a composer. He was a musical dramatist too. And if you separate the music from the drama, you miss so much of the magic. Although even in this rough and ready form, it's enough to send a shiver up the spine.
The Ring Cycle also reflected the violent contradictions of Wagner's own personality, one of the most extreme in the whole history of music. It's hard to say which had more drama in it, Wagner's life or his operas. He certainly behaved like a character in a romantic novel. He was deliberately elusive and mysterious as to his true parentage, and he invented for himself a role as a tortured maestro whose every will and whim had to be met for the creative muse to be unleashed. With his love of scented baths, satin undergarments and Venetian tapestries, Wagner came on like a latter-day Cleopatra. But the absurdly extravagant, luxury-loving man who completed the Ring Cycle in 1874 was a very different one from the one who'd started it 25 years earlier.
In 1848, he was working as musical director in Dresden's royal court. This was a year of political revolutions in Europe, and Wagner soon joined the struggle.
The young Wagner was a fiery, revolutionary socialist. Wagner was a member of a generation of radicals who believed that only revolution could change society for the better. In 1848, they put their ideas into action. A wave of armed uprisings swept across Europe. The following year, the composer was caught up in a revolution himself.
He fought on the side of the left-wing nationalists who wanted to topple the princely German states and replace them with a unified nation. When the uprising failed, he found himself a wanted man with a price on his head.
Wagner played a significant part in a violent uprising in his hometown here of Dresden. His job was to keep watch in the bell tower of the Kreuzkirche, reporting on the movements of the Prussian army sent to defeat the revolution. These dramatic events were to affect the rest of his life. When the uprising collapsed, Wagner managed to escape with a price on his head. His less lucky colleagues, who were captured, were sentenced to death, later commuted to life imprisonment.
He fled here to Switzerland. And inspired by the landscapes near his Zurich home, he plotted a theatrical revolution to breathe new life into an ancient tradition. He believed the greatest art form that mankind ever had was Greek tragedy, because Greek tragedy encompassed all the arts of acting, verse, music, dance, costume, spectacle, chorus. But more than that, it involved the whole community, all people. It wasn't a snobbish, elitist thing. It was a ceremony, a celebration. But more than that, it was a religious ceremony. And on top of that, too, its subject matter was myth. And Wagner believed very passionately that the very nature of myth was universal, because it was outside time. It wasn't about the bourgeois or the aristocracy. It wasn't stories of love affairs in history. It was outside time, almost like science fiction, but science fiction set in the past, if you like. It could speak to everybody, whatever their condition. So his revolutionary idea was to have what he called the total work of art, the Gesamtkunstwerk, and that therefore the word opera was pointless. He hated grand opera with its flounces and its absurd trills and ornaments. But he wanted to cleanse the theatre and cleanse art of all this nonsense and to get back to the elementals and to make a theatre for the people, which was music and dance and drama and everything. And he was going to be the one to create it, and he was going to be responsible for all aspects of it. And he put this together in an essay he wrote here in Switzerland, which was about the future work of art. And it was a future work of art that he was to make into a present work of art, the Wagnerian music drama.
Two years after the Dresden uprising, he began work on The Ring. His aim was to create a work that would help to reawaken the national spirit of his native country.
In 1857, he abandoned work on The Ring to focus on this new composition, the story of a forbidden love affair between the knight Tristan and Isolde, who is betrothed to another man. It's based on ancient legend, but the music is strikingly avant-garde, pushing at the boundaries of conventional harmony. And it all starts with this. The so-called Tristan chord. It may not look revolutionary, but it must have astonished the first audiences who heard it 150 years ago. Because rather than progressing to a harmonious resolution as musical tradition expected, it evolves into another unresolved discord instead. This chord, if someone was to look it up on Wikipedia, they'd find a huge entry just on this chord. What is it about this chord?
It's a chord of tension, of longing. Yeah. The first voice goes up, like you played,
yes,
right?
That longing,
and the other voices go down. So this is a depression. And this at the same time.
Yes, it does. This is where Wagner's genius as a composer merges with his brilliance as a dramatist. His music keeps you on the edge of your seat, waiting for the moment when the dissonance of those opening chords will be resolved.